يا شيخ we
Yes,
can.
wife is home.
आपके सही यूसुफ.
मैं ठीक हूँ अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. That's all I know. So I'm going to
That's all
start.
you need to know.
That's all I need to know yet. Why is it like this? I do full screen. Should I do one screen? 2 pages? No. Okay, that's better, right? So where did we get to? I think we got to like. I want to follow with the English because I think some people are finding it difficult the Arabic. I'm going to read the Arabic. Um, oh, yeah. Number 30. I think that's where we are. Yeah. Okay. So بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله بعلمه وعلمكم آمين حدثنا حسن بن بشر قال حدثنا الحكم بن عبد الملك عن قتادة عن الحسن عن عمران بن حسين قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما تقولون في الزنا وشرب we did this. Yeah, we're on this one. Making one's parents weep. So it says باب بكاء الوالدين حدثنا موسى قال حدثنا حماد بن سلمة عن and زياد I believe not زياد ابن مخراق عن طيسلة أنه سمع ابن عمر يقول بكاء الوالدين من العقوق والكبائر. Says making one's parents, so Ibn Umar, so Athar from Ibn Umar, not from the Prophet ﷺ. He said making one's parents weep is part of disobedience and one of the major sins. Okay, well, what if it's something good? You made your parents a kuffar and they cried because you became Muslim, right? Or your parents really, really wanted you to marry somebody who was really, really, really bad, and you say, I can't do that, right? I can, you can bend your will, but you can't change your sharia. Like your parents want you to marry, marry your cousin, okay? Then marry your other cousin. None of them pray. None of them wear hijab. None of them, like, deen is just not there, right? And you want to marry somebody of deen, right? As opposed to you want to marry one religious woman and there's another religious woman your parents want you to marry, for example, and they'd be really, really, really upset if you didn't marry this particular person, for example. Like a slightly different discussion there. May Allah protect us all. And obviously, one of the difficult things with parents is just how hard it is to communicate, right? Because it's kind of convoluted, very close, and it's kind of hard to communicate. But we have to get good at communicating, right? That's the thing. Getting good at communicating with our parents. No, it doesn't matter how difficult it is and how weird things have been or whatever, like just communicating well. Okay, so it says Bab Da'wat al-Walidain, the dua that one's parents makes. حدثنا معاذ بن فضالة قال حدثنا هشام عن يحيى وهو ابن أبي كثير عن أبي جعفر أنه سمع أبا هريرة يقول قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 3 دعوات مستجابات لهن لا شك فيهن دعوة المظلوم ودعوة المسافر ودعوة الوالدين على ولدهما. So we said there are 3 supplications that are answered without doubt. The supplication, the dua of somebody who is oppressed, so don't oppress people. The supplication of someone on a journey, and the supplication of parents ala waladihima, against, I have here, against their parents. 3, where is this? Uh, Doesn't say anything here, but here it says against da'a alayhi, right? So now your parents. So here's a question. So anyway, the translation seems to be off here. Allahu alam is when du'a against one's children. So you harm your father or your mother, or you say something bad to them, whatever, and they make du'a against you. That's one thing. Okay. Now, number one, should you make du'a against somebody specifically? So if somebody oppresses you, should you make du'a against them? The answer is no. You can say Allah. For example, somebody wrongs you, Allahumma alayka bil zalimeen. Ya Allah. Oh Allah, destroy wrongdoers, but not him or her, right? So you should never make dua for, against any individual, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to limit Allah's power and Allah's will. So don't do that. Don't do that. You don't know how the person is going to be in a split second. May Allah destroy Benjamin Netanyahu. How is he going to be tomorrow morning? How is he right now? Do you know he's not become Muslim right now? You don't know. Don't say that. Don't say that. Right? Imagine if you made dua against Sayyidina Umar and you realize, whoops, he was one person, then he was somebody else. So don't do that. But you can say, oh alayka, or Ya Allah, destroy oppressors. Ya Allah, destroy liars. Allah, anybody who does this, or Allah, if you hate them, destroy them. Right? Make them not a single happiness in this life or the next. Give them the most painful, whatever you can make dua against, but generally don't focus on a particular individual. Don't do that. So that's A. B, your parents say, if you don't do this, I'll make dua against you. Are your parents Allah? And can your parents twist Allah's arm? No. So what we're talking about is in a situation where you harm your parents, and they make dua in general against people like you, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers that dua. That's very scary. It'd be very, very scary. Like these people are not, it's not a joke. It's not a joke at all. As opposed to, if you don't study medicine, and I'll make dua against you. So now you're kind of forced. Okay, now my parents have divine power against me. If you don't get an A, I'll make dua against you. If you don't do this right now, I'll make dua against you. Ha, cornered you. It's not like that. Your parents are not Allah. Allah does not answer oppressors. If your parents are going to oppress you or something like that, right? You should be respectful and nice, and so that's all. You should never make dua against anybody in specifically not your children. But you should be very, very careful lest they make a generic dua against people like you, and it applies to you for something wrong that you have generally done. May Allah forgive us all. Okay, I'm going to read this long hadith, inshallah. So it says, حدثنا, I'll read parts of it and then okay. حدثنا عياش بن الوليد قال حدثنا عبد الأعلى قال حدثنا محمد بن إسحاق. Right, this is Muhammad ibn Ishaq. So if just going to the previous hadith, right? We see, who do we see in? Okay. This next hadith is it is super sahih, and it is it's in Bukhari and Muslim, the next hadith. So it says this one here, 33. It says عن يزيد بن عبد الله بن قصيط عن محمد بن شرحبيل أخي بني عبد الدار عن أبي هريرة قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ما تكلم مولود من الناس في مهد إلا عيسى بن مريم وصاحب جريج. قيل يا نبي الله وما صاحب جريج؟ قال فإن جريجا كان رجلا راهبا في صومعة له، وكان راعي بقر يأوي إلى أسفل صومعته، وكانت امرأة من أهل القرية تختلف على الراعي، فأتت أمه يوما فقالت يا جريج وهو يصلي، فقال في نفسه وهو يصلي أمي وصلاتي، فرأى أن يؤثر صلاته، ثم صرخت به الثانية فقال في نفسه أمي وصلاتي فرأى أن يؤثر صلاته ثم صرخت به الثالثة فقال أمي وصلاتي فرأى أن يؤثر صلاته فلما لم يجبها قالت لا أماتك الله يا جريج حتى تنظر في وجه المومسات ثم انصرفت فأتي الملك بتلك المرأة وولدت. Okay. So one day, who is it? So they said, the Prophet ﷺ said, nobody spoke in the cradle except for Isa ibn Maryam and the companion, the person of Jurayj. Sahib means the person who was involved with Jurayj. So Abu Huraira asked, O Prophet of Allah, who's the kid? Who's the kid to do with Jurayj? Prophet ﷺ replied, Jurayj was a monk who lived in a hermitage. And there was a cow herder who used to come to the foot of his cell or his hermitage, and a woman from the village used to come to the cow herd. One day his mother came while he was praying and called out Jurayj. He asked himself, should I pray or should I answer my mum? He said, no, I'll just keep praying. So she shouted to him a second time, and he again asked himself, should I pray or should I go to my mum? And he said, no, I'll pray. And she shouted a third time, and he said, should I pray or should I answer my mum? He said, no, I'll just keep praying. And when he did not answer, she said, Jurayj, may Allah not let you die before you have looked in the face of the beautiful women. That is not the right translation. Until you've looked at the faces of prostitutes. That's what it says. Mumisa. Right? Or again, at least licentious women, right? A woman who's like doesn't really care about the haram. A woman of loose morals. That's a mumisa. Then she left. ثم انصرفت فأتي الملك بتلك المرأة ولدت. And then the village woman was brought before the king after she had given birth. Okay, so there's a woman that keeps going to the place next to where Jurayj works. And there's another man that goes there, not her husband, right? And she has a child. فقال ممن قالت من جريج. So she's being accused of adultery, right? And so she says, who is the father of this child? And they said, this is Jurayj. قال أصاحب صومعتي, the one who lives in the cell as the hermit. And she said yes. قالت نعم. قال اهدموا صومعته وأتوني به. Destroy his cell and bring him. فضربوا صومعته بالفؤوس. And so they got axes and whatever, they hacked it to pieces until it collapsed. حتى وقعت وجعلوا يده إلى عنقه بحبل, and they tied his hands around his neck. ثم انطلق به, and he was brought فمر به, and he was made to pass by على المومسات. He was made and he's made to pass by these licentious women or indecent women. فرآهن, and he saw them. فتبسم, and he smiled. وهم ينظرن إليه من الناس, and they were looking at him. فقال الملك ما تزعم هذه. The king asked him, what does this person claim? قال ما تزعم, I don't know what she claims. قال تزعم أن ولدها منك. He said, this child that she gave birth to is from you. قال أنت تزعمين. He said, is that what you're saying? قالت نعم. قال أين هذا الصغير. And then he said, where is this child? قالوا هو ذا في حجرها. It's the baby sitting in her lap right now. So hijriha is in her lap, not in her room. فأقبل عليه فقال من أبوك قال راعي البقر. So then Jurayj went to the child, said, who's your father? And they said, the cow herd. right? He replied, قالوا هو ذا في قال ملك so i.e. then everybody was shocked and then they understood he was wrong and so they said we feel really really sad for breaking your thing etc etc and then he said, right, so we have to understand that hadiths are like that it's not organized, not edited, right? And often it's paraphrased and this and that. So it's kind of like it comes out in a form that's not so rhetorically clear. It's not like the Quran. So there's things that are dropped and things like here and things like that. Sometimes it doesn't even, it's kind of confusing how it makes sense because they're just focusing on one part and everything else is implied, etc. Right? It's a bit like that. قال فما نجعل فقال الملك أنجعل صومعتك من ذهب, should we rebuild your hermitage from gold? قال لا, قال من فضة, من silver, from silver. He said no. قال فما نجعلها, what should we do? قال ردوها كما كانت, just build it back please. قال فما الذي قال فما الذي تبسمت. He said, why did you smile at those women? قال أمرا عرفته, there was a particular thing that I recognized. أدركتني دعوة أمي, right? The dua of my mother against me caught up with me. And he told the story, right? And so we've got to be careful, right, of our parents. It's a huge haqq that they have over us. May Allah forgive us all. And it's a lesson, right? In reality, like being tested like this is a lesson. It's far better to be punished for being cruel to your parents or do something wrong to your parents and seeing it in your life than to catch it on Judgment Day. So it's a huge blessing, right? When something bad happens to you and you can connect it, it's like I see this. I did this and this led to this. I see it. It's a huge wake, being woken up is much better than dying in your sleep. You know. It's nice somebody wakes you up and say, hey, there's a fire, get out, right? So it's painful, right? When Allah gives us, the mother cat's paw in this life, it's hard, but it's a huge blessing. We should thank Allah, for it, make tawbah and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wakes us up from certain things. Like, yeah, I understood I was wrong. And just from a fiqh point of view, I'm sure there's difference of agreement among the fuqaha, but during a sunnah prayer, right? If you're in a sunnah prayer and your parents call you and they would you be genuinely upset, like that, like get out of the prayer now. Your mom's really, really angry, right? Then like I don't care if you're praying, open the door and you're like, oh, I'm praying, I can't stop the prayer. You stop the prayer, right? At least in the Shafi school. And another thing, like the rights of parents is your parents, you know, um, your parents. There's two people in your life, right? Or three people in your life that can be rude to you, basically. It's part of their haqq over you that you got to deal with their nonsense, with their nafs, right? With their shortcomings, right? Your mum, your dad, and your wife, right? That's kind of like their haqq. That your dad is being silly, you have to deal with that. Like you can't be like, Dad, this is just being ridiculous. Forget it. No. When you grow up, Dad, I'll talk to you. You can't be like that to your dad. You have to deal with their immaturity sometimes, or their rudeness, or their being ridiculous, as long as you're not going to harm yourself or somebody else. So you can't, you know, you have to be patient with that, with your mother, with your wife, right? You can't be like, well, this is immature. And it's like, yeah, I know, but I'm your wife. Who else am I going to be immature with? Who else can I act? You know, this is not workplace. At work, it's different. Like I'm not going to deal with immaturity at work or whatever. This is ridiculous. I don't have to deal with. You're not obliged to deal with people's nonsense, right? You don't have to deal with that. You do have to deal with nonsense from your parents or nonsense from your wife. Otherwise, how's it going to work, right? There's a whole other, we can have a whole other class on marriage and these things you can have on YouTube. You can listen to it, right? But it's like, you need to, you just have to deal with that. So you can't be like, oh, my parents are just so immature. This is ridiculous. It's true, they are immature and they are doing something wrong to some extent. Like, should his mother had made dua against him? No, but that doesn't matter, right? You have to kind of deal with these things, as long as you're not harming yourself or harming somebody else. Your mom's like, give me money. Okay, sure. Give me more money. Sure. Give me more money. Sure. Buy me this, buy me this, buy me this, buy me this. She's ringing you 50,000 times a night. It's too much, right? Just, but you can't come and say you're just stupid, you're just crazy, you can't do that to your mom, right? You hold back harm, but you have to be respectful, right? Holding back harm is one thing, respectful is something else. Okay, no, don't mean to sound misogynistic at all, but you know, um, does a wife have to put up with the ridiculousness of the husband? To some extent, it's not the same though, right? It's not the same. باب عرض الإسلام على الأم النصرانية, right? Dutifulness. Where are we? Did I skip a hadith? Oh yeah, here. Offering Islam to a Christian mother. Right. So this is the biggest ihsan you can ever do to your parents is make them convert. Right? That's like the biggest thing you could ever do. You save them from the hellfire. It's like a huge thing. باب عرض الإسلام على الأم النصرانية قال أبو الوليد, right? And what else, if I ask, for example, my dad passed away almost a year ago now, right? Like, what does my dad want from me? What does he want? He wants me to focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is my bir. That's how I can be good to my dad, right? There's some other few things here and there, but basically that's it. That's what he wants from me, right? And any religious parent or any parent that has their head on their shoulders, that's what they want. I don't really care what you're doing or where you are. I don't care what job you do or what you want from your kids. I just want you to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to be a doctor, you want to be a I don't know, race car driver. I don't really care. As long as you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I really don't care. And as long as you're going that direction 120%, that's what I want you to do. You're leaving the haram, and you're doing the wajib, and you're just focusing in your life on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's birrul walidain. Right? That's what the religious parent wants me. Right? I don't need your money. I don't need your company. Right? If you're out doing something good, that's great. But for non-Muslim parents, that's the biggest thing you can do, right? Is to convert them. It's a huge thing. It says حدثنا أبو الوليد حدثنا هشام بن عبد الملك قال حدثنا أكرمة بن عمار قال حدثني أبو كثير السحيمي قال سمعت أبا هريرة يقول ما سمع بي أحد يهودي ولا نصراني إلا أحبني إن أمي كنت أريدها على الإسلام فتأبى قلت لها فأبت فأتيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقلت أدعو الله لها فدعا فأتيتها وقد أجافت عليها الباب فقالت يا أبا هريرة إني أسلمت فأخبرت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقلت أدعو الله لي ولأمي قال اللهم عبدك أبو هريرة وأمه أحبهما إلى الناس. So Abu Huraira, he said, neither Jew nor Christian has heard of me and not loved me. Like, everybody likes me. Muslim and non-Muslim, they all love me. I wanted my mother to become Muslim, but she refused. I told her about it and she still refused. I went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, pray to Allah for me. He did so, and I went to her. She was inside the door of the house and said, oh Abu Huraira, I have become Muslim. I told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I asked, make supplication to Allah for me and my mother. And he said, oh Allah, make people love Abu Huraira and his mother. Subhanallah. Who is it? Al-Khatib al-Shirbini, one of the late Shafis. He was like that. He was one of the great awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ninth century, 10th century, I think, in Egypt. And so the Christians used to come up to him and kiss his hand. Right? He was just such an amazing person. Right? And we see how Abu Huraira was to his prophet, to his mother, right? Very affectionate, very nice, right? And so again, how can you be good to your parents? Your parents are not doing the right thing. With adab and with love and care and concern, you protect them, right? That's the best thing you can do for your kids, for your parents. Guide them, right? Do something that actually benefits them, right? They worry about your education. It's like, your education is important, but that's not. But they worry about your education because they worry about your dunya, which is wrong, right? That's a wrong thing to worry about. Like, it doesn't matter at all. But what matters is you help them in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's like the biggest thing you can do to them, right? In a nice way, of course, with adab. Um, so bab birrul walidain ba'da mawtihima, dutifulness, being kind to them after their death. Right? As I mentioned, what's the biggest thing you can do is fulfill their religious legacy. Right? Pray, fast, do the things that they wish they could have done. Right? In their deen. So he says حدثنا أبو نعيم قال حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن الغسيل قال أخبرني أسيد بن علي بن عبيد عن أبيه أنه سمع أبا أسيد يحدث القوم قال كنا عند النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال رجل يا رسول الله هل بقي من بر أبوي شيء بعد موتهما أبرهما قال نعم خصال أربع. So Usaid, he said, we were with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and a man asked, a messenger of Allah, is there any act of dutifulness which I can do for my parents after their death? He replied, yes, there are four things. الدعاء لهما والاستغفار لهما وإنفاذ عهدهما وإكرام صديقهما وصلة الرحم التي لا رحم لك إلا من قبلهما. Um, He said four things, so making dua for them, asking forgiveness for them, fulfilling their pledges, being generous to their friends of theirs. Uh, hmm? And I have a different, you only have kinship through your parents. That's not the translation. He says, and keeping ties with those whom you only connect through them. Right? So you only have a connection through that parent. Now you're keeping connection with those people, right? So it says حديث أخرجه أبو داود وابن ماجه عن أسيد قال حافظ في التهذيب أخرجه ابن حبان والحاكم في. So this hadith is good enough for the level of Abu Dawood and Ibn Majah, and it's in the Sahih of Ibn Hibban and the Sahih of Hakim, but it's not the level of Bukhari Muslim. So who can remind us what that means? It's in this book by Imam Bukhari, but yet it's not on the level of Bukhari. What does that even mean?
It's like a Toyota Corolla
Okay, so but it's in Imam Bukhari's quoting it, so like I don't understand. How is it not on the level of Bukhari?
because Imam Bukhari likes Toyotas and Ferraris.
Okay, are these two different books? Sahih Bukhari is one book and Adab al-Mufrad is another book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another book. That is his collection of Ferraris, right, and Lamborghinis. So it's like super high level Sahih hadiths. Okay, and then the other level is for example things like, oh, this is about being a nice person. Okay, yeah, sure, any hadith will go. A weak hadith, no, not a problem, not a problem, right? Not an issue. I'm trying to prove an issue of halal haram. I don't need super high level, right? So when he's, for example, he has a book, why you should raise your hands in prayer. Okay, that's a book. It's more like an essay, right? It's a small book, and so in that there's going to be all sorts of hadiths because I'm using it for halal haram. So one of my teachers he said knowledge is of two things: knowing book names and knowing how they work. That's it. If you just knew every single book, well, not every single book, but let's say the main had books of X, Y, whatever science it is, and knowing what they do, right? You understand things. But people don't understand that. They don't understand what the book is doing. Then you don't know what to do with it, right? So it's very, very, very important. What is this book? What does it do? Right? Very, very important concept. Um, Okay, so it's good enough for a book like this, not good enough for a book like that. That doesn't make so when you say sahih, it's like, well, sahih for what? As we spoke about before, when the fuqaha look at these things, they look when the scholars look at these things, like they're interested in what you're going to use that book, that hadith for. Is it good enough to prove aqidah? No, because it's not mutawatir, it's not mass transmitted. So you can't, it's not an I know hadith. It doesn't give you knowledge. It's not good enough for aqidah. It's good. It doesn't prove that. It doesn't prove what is fundamental in the deen because it's not fundamentally true. It just may be true. Is it good enough to prove halal haram? Yeah. Is it good enough to put in Sahih Bukhari or Muslim? Yeah. And so for me personally, right, there's a number of reasons why I wouldn't advise somebody to study Bukhari and Muslim. Um, number one, because the level is too high, right? So you're basically, I'm looking at Ferraris when it's the street. Like if you just said, for example, I'm only going to look at Ferraris on the road. Like how many Ferraris are there on the road, right? Number one. Number two, because the books are so unbelievably difficult to study, particularly Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, right? So if you had 5 years to study, you got 5 years, and I can do it right now, and you're just going to be like, I'm not doing anything but study Sahih Bukhari. That's fine, right? It's a very important book. But if you're not going to do that, like you're just going to study Bukhari like on the side, or like it's like I don't really see the point particularly. Whereas if you study Abu Dawood or Tirmidhi, those collections are organized around hadith to do with halal haram, right? So it's very different. So there's a Sahih hadith in it, there's a Hasan hadith, there's a weak hadith, but it's been acted upon. It's very useful, particularly Tirmidhi, right? One of the most useful books ever. Really, really important, right? And Abu Dawood was what? Student of Imam Ahmad, right? He was continually showing his book to Imam Ahmad. What do you think about it? How I organize it? Should I put this hadith in it? Right? He was kind of like editing it and showing to Imam Ahmad. So it's a very, very unique book, right? That's why you look at in the Indo-Pak, yes, they have Bukhari Muslim, they have commentaries on Bukhari Muslim, but there's an amazing concern for Sunan Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi because they're super unbelievably useful, right? Tirmidhi specifically. I love Tirmidhi. It's one of my favorite hadith books. It's very, very useful. And simply because it's got a lower bar, right? And so there's a hadith in that it is actually, one of these points of contention. Some ulama say it's sahih, some say it doesn't. Some people understand it, someone understands it like this, someone understands it like that. And so as opposed to the problem with Bukhari Muslim, or particularly Bukhari, is the level is so high that it might be a significant hadith that is a point of contention between the ulama or is used for proof, but it's not even there because the level is too high, right? So it's a very, very specific book with very specific goals, right? Um, okay. Like my class today, I have my last class today, right? I have Jawhar Tawheed, right? This is like a pre-intermediate level book in Aqidah, right? People register for the class and I say, please leave. Like, why don't you kick me out of the class? Because you're not ready for it. Like, it's not useful for 99% of the world. So I asked them to leave. Like, only if you do this, 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 then you can do this class, right? So there's certain things just that's not useful for the average Joe. Right? So Abu Dawood and Tirmidhi, these are very, very, very important books. And Nasa'i is very important as well, but it's more for Sina'at Hadithiyah, for how he's doing ilal and showing what's wrong with the hadith. It's something different. So if you want to learn like hadith, like I have, where is it? Sunan Nasa'i here. Where is it? And I'm just going through and looking at how he works. Right, Imam Nasa'i is a huge, huge hadith critic. So how he's criticizing the hadith and finding the errors in the hadith is much more easier. But with Imam Bukhari, it's very hard to do that. To do a lot of homework to find out exactly what he's doing and why. Like, imagine, for example, I have to find out why this Ferrari didn't make it to the Ferrari collection. That's really hard. Like, why is it that you accept Lamborghinis, but this Lamborghini you didn't put in your collection of Lamborghinis? Why? So it's very, very hard to work with it, as opposed to like Tirmidhi is very open, it's very clear. Abu Dawood generally is very open and clear. They're much more useful, right? I think Imam Ghazali said like if you have Abu Dawood, you have no, even Abu Dawood himself said that. He said if somebody just had my book, they would have enough. Like you'd have enough for fiqh, right? It's a hyperbole, of course, but it's like it's a good summary of like the main hadith to do with halal and haram, right? As opposed to the level with Bukhari is so high, there's so many hadiths that are acceptable or borderline are not even there to begin with. Okay. 36, right? It says حدثنا أحمد بن يونس قال حدثنا أبو بكر عن عاصم عن أبي صالح عن أبي هريرة قال ترفع للميت بعد موته درجته فيقول أي ربي أي شيء هذه قال فيقال ولدك استغفر لك. Right? Um, and this hadith is Hasan, and it's in Ibn Majah, and it's also in the Muwatta. It's also in the Muwatta, but it's not on the level of Bukhari Muslim. So it says, what is it? A dead person will be raised a whole degree. So daraja is like a next level. Like when you imagine you moved from economy to business class, like that. It's different. Not you go. It's not like you kind of. It's like a discrete change. Discrete change. That's the term we're using math. The discrete and indiscrete. It's like a like you imagine like somebody who's standing on planet Earth and somebody who's in space. Like it's totally different. So you raised a whole level, a whole realm, right, in his after death. And he said, "My Lord, how is this possible?" He said, "One of your children made istighfar for you." Right? So one of my teachers, he taught me to do this. Says in the Fatiha, you say غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. You say اللهم اغفر لي ولوالدي آمين. Right? So just between that before that Ameen, you say, "Oh Allah, forgive me and my parents," and then say Ameen. Right? Imagine if you do that every single time you do the Fatiha. Every single time you do the Fatiha, Allahumma aghfir li wa li walidayya, and you say Ameen. So at that point, when the angel's about to say Ameen, and the angels, the dua is accepted, and then you say, "Oh Allah, forgive me and my parents," and then you say Ameen. Right? Um, so we mentioned the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Right? The Muwatta of Imam Malik is the most useful of all works. It's even more useful than Tirmidhi. Why? Because it is the heart of the 6 books. Because if you can imagine, the author of the 6 books, they're all studying with the students of Imam Malik. And it is the first visible organization of fiqh, right? And it's the first visible organization of hadith. And it has many athar that are particularly relevant, right? So that's why I teach on Tuesdays, I teach the Muwatta of Imam Muhammad, because that is a mélange, a mix of Hanafi and Maliki fiqh, right? Let's see these two of the most important camps of fiqh ever. So you see the most important hadiths and the most important athar. So that's another thing. The fatwa of the Sahaba and Tabi'een, you won't generally see them in the 6 books. So there's a whole discussion, a whole fatwa that you didn't even see, and you're just like, I don't understand. Like, where does it even come from? Like, why do they say this? And it's like not a single hadith. That's because from this Sahabi or that Sahabi. Like, oh, whoops. So Al-Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, he said that. He said like this, the qalb, the source. Well, obviously he's Maliki, but he said that the center of it all is the Muwatta. Bukhari is the next level, and Tirmidhi is the next level. But if you just do the Muwatta of Imam Malik or the Muwatta of Imam Muhammad plus Tirmidhi, you have a very good picture of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. What did the Prophet ﷺ tell us to do? And generally what the Sahaba and Tabi'een said and didn't say. Right? You have a good picture, right? Tirmidhi and Muwatta. It's very, very good. These are my two favorite books, right? And I didn't understand Shafi fiqh until I studied the Muwatta, right? But the Shafi fiqh is a continuation of the Maliki madhab, and the Maliki madhab is a continuation of the Medinan school, right? Just like the Hanafi school is a continuation of the Kufan school. And so it's very important books. Okay. So this is Ibn Sirin, right? This is Muhammad Ibn Sirin, right? When we say Ibn Sirin, it means Muhammad Ibn Sirin. There's also Anas Ibn Sirin, his brother, and Hafsa bin Sirin, his sister, and I think 2 others, right? They were all scholars. Hafsa, we hear Hafsa when we hear Anas and Muhammad, right? حدثنا محمد موسى قال حدثنا السلام بن أبي مطيع عن غالب قال محمد بن سيرين كنا عند أبي هريرة ليلة فقال اللهم اغفر لأبي هريرة ولأمي ولمن استغفر لهما قال لي محمد فنحن نستغفر لهما حتى ندخل في دعوة أبي يا أبي هريرة. So Muhammad ibn Sirin saying we were with Abu Huraira one night and he said, "Oh Allah, forgive Abu Huraira and his mother and whoever asked for forgiveness for the both of them." So Muhammad ibn Sirin said, we used to ask for forgiveness for them so that we would be included in Abu Huraira's dua. Abu Huraira reported so next one. um, حتى حدثنا أبو الربيع قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن جعفر قال أخبرنا العلاء عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة. So this is a chain. Again, we will not find in Bukhari, but you find it in Muslim. But in again, how Bukhari Muslim uses it as well, it's going to be something else. But it's not on the level of um, it's not on the level of Bukhari. So Ala, this is Ala ibn Ibrahim. Ala ibn Ibrahim, I believe that's his name. عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا مات العبد انقطع عنه عمله إلا من ثلاث: صدقة جارية وعلم ينتفع به أو ولد صالح يدعو له. So he says, Abu Hurairah reports the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when a person dies, all of his actions are cut off with the exception of three things: sadaqah that continues after his death, i.e., an endowment, right? You built a well, you built a stuff for our church, you built a school, you built a masjid, right? So that's what we should do, right? It's more important to build endowments. If you have the money to buy a house, don't buy a house, make an endowment in a poor country and then buy your house, right? I'm not saying not against people buying houses, but just be clever with your money, right? You got $10,000. $10,000 can build a well, can do all sorts of things, right? If you have extra money, do that. What do I spend all my money on?
Books.
Books, right? Super useful. So if I had extra money, it's like this. I have a list of about 200 books that I need to buy. How much is it going to cost? I don't know, and I don't care, right? So if I had extra money, I'd just buy more books. That's useful, right? So I either spend more money on things that I need in the house, family, or books. That's what I'm doing. And someone's like, why do you have so many books? It's like, it's all useful. Every single book I've ever bought is useful. One book wasn't useful, I gave it away, right? I looked at it, I was like, hey, it's interesting, and I gave it away. But otherwise, uh, like I bought a random commentary on Tirmidhi, open one page, subhanAllah, exactly the thing I was looking for. Right? Every single book is going to open something and it's going to help people after you. What if I died today? Okay, and all my books go to Brentwood Masjid. Fantastic. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Right? Beneficial knowledge. Right? Imam Bukhari is teaching us right now, subhanAllah. He's teaching us, his teacher is teaching us, his teacher's teacher is teaching us, his teacher's teacher teaches everyone. The Prophet is continually teaching us, subhanAllah. Right? So these things we should invest in. It's just being clever with investment, right? Make an endowment, right? Instead of buying a house for your kids, buy a house and put it in your will that this is for anybody who is working full-time in sacred knowledge. So then if your son is now working full-time in sacred knowledge, then he can have that house. Otherwise he can't. So you've made a house for your son, but you've also made sure that he does what is right and useful. And if he's not, then someone else is going to do it for useful. So now you say, for example, this house, for example, is in Brentwood, for example, where we live in California. And it's going to, when I die, it will go to be part of this endowment for the masjid for anybody who's doing X, Y, and Z. Right? It's useful. As opposed to giving a house, half a house to one person. Right? Just be clever with money. That's what I'm trying to say. Because these things, when you die, you don't, you know, you don't need to leave money for your kids. You need to leave deen for your kids. You need to leave things that so I'm not against people buying houses with the rent, in California is crazy. And so, it does make sense to some extent. But I'm just saying, like, just be clever, have an endowment. What's going to live after you, right? Knowledge which benefits and a righteous child, right? So number one thing, have children. Don't have children. Have righteous children, i.e. spend time with them and teach them the deen. That's the whole point. Well, that's the point of having kids, right? There's no point in having kids otherwise, right? I was telling my wife recently, my daughter's still very young, right? And when kids are young, it's harder to have a spiritual relationship with them, right? Because they're kind of like, they're just edible, right? So I was saying, like, with my boys, I have a spiritual relationship with them, right? Like I'm trying to I see their extension of my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With my daughter, she's still just dunya, right? She's like this edible little thing you just want to bite, right? In a nice way, of course. Um, so it's like so that's our kids. Our kids should be out an extension. So, many people they say, don't live, was it? Don't live your life through your kids, right? Like, oh, I want to do medicine. Now my son has to be a doctor. I wanted to get married young or not get married young. I want to do that through my daughter, whatever. Don't do that. But do live living your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a totally different way, perhaps through your kids is a good thing, right? The ikhlas that you couldn't achieve, I want that to be my kids. The yaqeen that you couldn't achieve, I want that in my kids, right? The azima, the resolve to do what is right, I want that in my kids. That's fine, right? And so that's it. That's what you want in your kids. That is you, right? Righteous children that make dua for you. That's the biggest interest. So that means money is not very useful. One of my friends, he has like I don't know 5 kids, 7 kids. He said kids do not remember gifts; they remember activities. So don't buy them things. Go on trips with them. Spend your money on holidays. Spend your money on holidays and make it religious. Hiking, trips, this. That's what you should do. Spend time with them and make them religious. And bring it around. Ice cream, religious. This, religious. This, religious. So the deen, they love the deen. That's what's useful. Otherwise, it's not really particularly useful. Having a house or having a car or having, I don't know, whatever it is. No, doesn't really help that much. Right. My dad, I've received nothing, I don't think. Maybe something from my dad. Received nothing from my dad. I don't think he didn't leave anything. I mean, there's some stuff in his house like didn't have anything. No property, nothing. Um, so it's fairly irrelevant, right? I was working at 19, totally fine. So don't worry about your kids' rizq, worry about your kids' deen, because that's what's going to help you in the grave. Your kids' deen, meaning not have they memorized this and do they know this, but their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That's what we want the kids to do, right? So Ibn Abbas reported the Prophet ﷺ said, Messenger of Allah, sallallahu or next one. حدثنا يسرة بن صفوان قال حدثنا محمد بن مسلم عن عمرو عن إكرمة عن ابن عباس أن رجلا قال يا رسول الله إن أمي توفيت ولم توصي أفينفعها أن أتصدق عنها قال نعم. So Ibn Abbas, he said that man said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, my mother died without a will. Will it help her if I give charity on her behalf?" He said, "Yes." So this is a whole discussion, which is a hadith صحيح أخرج المصنف في الوصايا والترمذي في الزكاة, etc. Right? So, can you do good deeds for other people? So when it comes to sadaqah, we agree, yes, you can give sadaqah for other people. Can you pray for other people? Like, Ya Allah, I'm going to pray you 2 rakahs, and may Allah give the ajr of these 2 rakahs to my dad. Well, number one, if your dad taught you to be religious, your dad gets reward anyway, right? But let's say, for example, somebody's not your dad, right? And it was not the read. So Allah, some random person that died, Ya Allah, I'm going to do a khatam, right? Classic. I'm going to do a khatam and I say, oh Allah, give the reward of this khatam to this dead person. Does that count or does it not count? An issue of debate. But it's based on this. We all agree a sadaqah counts, benefits, right? If you can give sadaqah for somebody on behalf of somebody else. But what about other good deeds? So Al-Izz ibn Abdus Salam, one of the great Shafi'i scholars, one of the huge Shafi'i scholars, he says no. Allah, that's وَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, a person only has what he strove for. That's it. And that the exception to that is certain things that come in a hadith. That's it. There's no way you cannot give good deeds to other people. Khalas, you're dead, that's it. These are the exceptions. And so, you give charity on behalf of somebody, that's an exception. But otherwise, you cannot do it. Ibn Taymiyyah and others, and kind of like majority of kind of scholars, they'd say, yeah, you can do that. Pray 2 rakahs, say, well, I'll give that to so and so. Pray, go on Umrah say, well, Allah, give the reward of this. Do Quran, whatever good deed, say, well, Allah, give this, right? So Allah will give you the reward and them, right? And so it's the whole thing about a khatam is a kind of a khatam is it's again one of these very negative debates, right? So someone's like, don't do a khatam. Like, why? Because it's a bid'ah. Like reciting Quran is a bid'ah. Like, I don't understand, right? So maybe you're wrong. Like maybe it's true you're wrong that the person, Allah will not give that good deed to that person, right? So it's argument. It's true, right? It could be true that Allah will not give the reward. Okay, what's the problem then? I sat and I read a whole khatam for this person, and Allah didn't accept it as a reward for them. But will Allah accept it for you? Yes. So what's the problem? It gets really like a non-discussion. So, I just want to end on this point. Um, who is it? Imam al-Awza'i, right? It's a really important thing. Imam al-Awza'i, he said, I've heard, right? Maybe from he's from the Salaf anyway, so from the Sahaba or Tabi'een or perhaps from the Prophet ﷺ. He said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ill for people, he wants the people to be destroyed. He makes them engage in debate and stops them doing anything. So they're just there. Is it sunnah? Is it not sunnah? Is it sunnah? Not sunnah? And they don't do anything. Whole argument 20 rakahs or 8 rakahs, 20 rakahs or 8 rakahs, 20, and then nobody prays that to anyway. And if they do pray, they have anger in their hearts towards somebody else, and Allah doesn't accept their prayer, right? So just do whatever you're going to do, right? Perhaps this hadith can be understood to mean that you could do a khatam for a dead person. Perhaps it doesn't. Allahu alam. If you want to go and do it, do it. If you don't want to go do it, don't do it. It's not a big deal, right? It's not a big deal, right? So may Allah forgive us all. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.